introduce ourselves or go around? Ready to start? Okay. I'd like to welcome everybody to the February 28th Public Safety Meeting. I'm Alderman Goodwin, Ward 4 Chair.
Alderman Collins, Ward 5. And Alderman Garten, Ward 5.
Jim Jones, his assistant chief of Hendersonville PD.
Mickey Miller, Hendersonville PD.
Scotty Bush, Hendersonville Fire.
Mayor Jamie Clary.
Lance Ray, interim city attorney.
Lincoln.
Steve Rozak, just a citizen.
Jesse Eknerall, Chief of Operations.
Okay, do we have a motion to accept the agenda?
Oh, so moved.
Okay, and we need to, would you like to make a motion to approve? Second?
Second.
Okay, and let's vote.
Yes. Aye.
Motion approved.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes.
For December 13th meeting.
Yes.
Okay, I'll second because you were not in attendance.
Same.
Okay.
So it's
Motion approved. Unanimous. And we will move on to our ordinances and resolutions. Our first one will be ordinance 2023-05. Make a motion to talk about this.
So moved. Second.
Motion approved.
I'm the sponsor of that, but I'm gonna turn this over to Chief and Assistant Chief so they can explain it to you.
Okay,
Then I do need to fill you in on one thing later on.
okay.
No, go ahead.
So this is a grant from the Office of Criminal Justice Programs that we received. It is a non-matching grant in the amount of $184,860. The OCJP has funded the grants nationwide, but they're asking each state to administer those grants. So this particular grant, the state had a formula that they determined the amount of funding for each agency that applied. If the agency, first of all, met the requirements of the grant, and then second of all, if the funding request met the terms of the grant. So our grant request was approved in that amount. And this is a grant that will be done over 3 years' time. That's the life of the grant. There is no stipulation as to how, or excuse me, the time frame for the monies to be spent other than within the 3 years. Our intention is to spend a smaller amount first year. The majority of the grant will be expended the second year, and then a small amount will be remaining for the third year of the grant, the life of the grant. And what this grant, the BCIF grant, is the Violent Crimes Initiative funding, is where that came from. So the grant funds have to be expended toward combating violent crime. So the money that was appropriated for this grant from the federal government will go toward purchasing software, officer safety equipment, some investigative equipment, and additional specialized training for our police officers.
I am really happy that we are getting this.
It's definitely a benefit to the city because these are, so the things that we plan to do with this grant are things that we would have come to the board anyway to ask for funding for. So this is nothing out of the ordinary as far as the items in the grant, but it allows us to go ahead and do that and the city not have to fund those expenses. So it's really beneficial for the police department and the city and the citizens here.
Okay.
Thank you.
Does anyone have any questions on that? And I know we're moving it to BOMA tonight because of the deadline. And I would like to make a motion to move that forward with a positive positive recommendation from public safety, since
Second.
there's no
Support.
second, okay. So,
Aye.
so motion approved to move forward with positive. All right. Next, we have resolution 2023-05. And we will let Mayor Clary speak on that.
We'll take a motion. on-
Motion, yes. Make a motion to discuss.
So moved. Second.
Okay,
So we need to change the text a little bit, and Lance will explain this to y'all. He's had a couple conversations with folks. Because this is just a resolution to go to the state and to ask them to give us permission to do it. Then it comes back and we have to pass an ordinance, very similar to what we did with term limits. We need to ask the state permission to do it. In order to pass that resolution, the board needs to pass the resolution by 2/3 of the vote. But Lance will go ahead and explain why this is different than what you got right.
We find it harder and harder to find out who landlords are, their identities, because they're LLCs or corporations, and tenants don't know who their landlords are. We don't know who landlords are. And it also allows us to reach out and provide support and education that we need to. And state law, we follow the Uniform Residential Landlord and Tenant Act. And under that law, you cannot add or take away from, like the Bible, if you will. And but it does, under state law, have one provision that allows Nashville, Davidson County to have registration for residential landlords, where they give us their identity, contact information. So we are asking the state to amend the law to allow us to require it in Hendersonville. And I've been working with the legislative attorney for the General Assembly on how to do this, and he said that Memphis is currently in the process of doing this too. And the language there in that updated resolution is the exact mirrored language in the statute for Nashville. So we're just taking what they've already done, and that's the information we think we need. So if that helps. Any questions?
anybody have any questions on that? I would like to make a motion to send that to BOMA with a positive recommendation from the public safety.
Second.
All approve.
Aye.
Next, we have the reading of resolution 2023-10. Like to make a motion to discuss that.
Second.
All approve.
Aye.
Also mine, but I need to turn it over to our police officers and to our CLO.
Okay, so this is our K-9 officers are members of the USPCA, the United States Police K-9 Association. They offer training, certifications through their association. And all of our current handlers and their dogs maintain current certifications through the USPCA. So what happened this year was the USPCA is teaming up with the American Kennel Club. Although it's fairly separate because they have kind of different goals, but some of them are much the same. So the actual title for this was the USPCA and AKC Reunite Grant, for them coming together to work on projects. And they made it known to the USPCA membership that if you're current members and certified to USPCA and you're planning on purchasing another dog, fill out, it was actually fairly simple. A one-page form telling them that you're planning on doing that, and they would fund half of the dog. So we have one of our patrol narcotics K9s that's fixing to retire due to age, the life of a working dog. It's somewhat limited due to what they go through. And so this dog is fixing to, within the next 7 or so months, going to have to retire. So we had planned to come before public safety and BOMA in the upcoming budget year and request a replacement canine for that dog. And so as part of that, they said, okay, we will pay half of what that next animal costs. So we were, I mean, and it was, they said it would be several weeks. Within 2 weeks, we received a check for $7,500. So we submitted that check to finance with a note on it, basically that says this is going to be earmarked and carry over for next budget, when we will come before public safety and BOMA to ask for the remainder of the money to pay for that dog. So instead of the full 15,000, we'll only be asking the city for $7,500 to make up the difference.
And that was already gonna be part of your budget.
It was already in the plans. We try to stay ahead of what a dog's health condition is, their age, the type of work they're doing. You know, some dogs, depending on the work, can work longer than others. Controlling narcotics canines, typically their working lifespan, and I don't mean their life, but their working years are much shorter, just due to the impact that type of work has on those dogs. So this dog is, you know, we knew that in the coming year, he was going to need to retire, just due to age and his health. So that was already part of our planning for next budget cycle anyway. And this was just
A bonus.
a bonus that they offered that, and they did it very quickly. We did notify them that we were not in a position at this time to buy another dog. And we said, you know, it is going to be dependent on public safety and BOMA approving that in our next budget. And it wouldn't be till after July till we expended the funds. And they go, oh yeah, it's no problem at all. So they're very easy to work with.
Anybody else have any questions? I will make a motion to send that on to BOMA with a positive recommendation.
Second. Aye. Aye.
Okay, unanimous. Okay, next we have resolution 2023-11. Make a motion to discuss that.
Aye. So moved. Second.
Motion approved.
I'm the sponsor of that one, and the intent is to make sure that we are being very purposeful about the replacement of our vehicles, because I know that in the past, there were years that were really lean and we couldn't buy all the vehicles that we needed to. And I want to make sure that it will happen again. Hopefully not, but if it happens again, that whoever is on board is really aware of the impact that has and how long it will take to recover from whatever cuts are made. That's basically it. And after talking with Jesse, we kind of settled on the medium as far as replacing a little sooner or a little later. We kind of went with what we considered to be a moderate route for that.
How do y'all feel about do you have any comments about the schedule?
So I mean, the way it looks like for us, it's 15 years for frontline, 5 for reserve status, and that's what an NFPA standard recommends. I mean, obviously, I'm on board with that right now. It's kind of ironic that we're having this discussion. Our current reserve now being 24 years old, we've really going to have a decision to make here in the next couple of days. Our computer board's gone completely out on that one, and so we don't have a reserve currently as we sit. So if one of our frontline engines were to go down, we're looking at spending money on something that within the next 18 months, we're going to be taking it out of service anyway. So that's a decision we'll have to talk. And I just found that out today in between all my other meetings. So I've not had a chance to talk to Mr. Eckenroth or the mayor, either one, about that. So it's not like I'm trying to land a bombshell on anybody, but certainly 15 years frontline, 5 for reserve status is adequate for us, 100%.
You all happy with that
Yeah.
schedule?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think from a budgeting perspective, it allows us to plan and budget on a yearly basis. So I think what happens with a policy like this is we will put in place into the budget is a practice to put into a replacement fund where every year the budget just allocates, X amount of dollars to meet this schedule. So if we come into those lean years, maybe there is some reduction, but we're not at a zero. We have already set some funds aside. So I think from a budgeting perspective, this will help the city be consistent year over year and mitigate the lean years.
I was, of course, again, I haven't had a chance to talk to Mr. Eckenoff about it, but I was doing some research. They bought a truck company someplace up north, $1.9 million. And how they funded it was like a reserve plan, like you folks are talking about doing, and just setting that interest aside for an account like this. And again, that's an option you folks would have to look at and do, but certainly it makes sense financially to draw interest off your own money and then set it aside for purchases like this for both police and fire, public works, whatever's needed as far as those big ticket items. So it doesn't feel like it catches you off guard. It's a laid out plan that nobody thinks, hey, this is a surprise moment. No, this has been laid out. Here it is.
And if we do have to get away from what the guidelines are, we will know exactly what the impact of that is and be making, I hope, a more well-informed decision. And I mean, I didn't realize how far behind we were on police cars. I don't know that I would have, but I might have. It would have been difficult. I might have prioritized that over adding money to paving or something else, but I didn't realize that I was prioritizing in the way that I was. So future boards will have more comprehensive information. And it'll be part of the budget workshop, and it'll go through the finance committee after it comes here. So
I think it's a great idea. I think you need a plan because a lot of the vehicles probably shouldn't even be on the road. So.
Yeah.
Motion and move it to download with a positive recommendation.
A second,
I honestly.
motion approved, passed to Bowman. Next, we have resolution 2023-12. Resolution to apply for a SAFER grant. Make a motion to discuss.
Second.
Motion approved for discussion.
So as per ordinance or per rules, we're supposed to come before the board and ask before we apply permission to apply for an opportunity like this. We applied last year. We did not get granted that SAFER grant or denied, which is typical. We got one in 2018. We hired 19 folks in 2018 with a SAFER grant. With Station 7 coming online, we do have enough staffing now to open that. However, the trickle down effect would be you're going to reduce vacation leave, training opportunities. You can't account for illnesses or injuries, people having babies, things like that. And then we may be faced with some staffing shortages. We've got some folks retiring. I've got 2 coming up in March and April, and I've got another 2 coming up in June, my assistant chief and another captain. And so we're down 6 right now for other reasons. We have 4 in the academy now. They won't be done till later this summer, which will reduce that. We have an opening in prevention now that will probably come from suppression. That's the firefighters. And that goes to a day position, which will create another vacancy. And so we'll never probably be fully staffed for quite some time, just for the way that TFACA holds academies. They only hold them in February and August. And so we got lucky enough this time to land in Murfreesboro, and we're always seeking those opportunities that we can partner with them and send our recruits to their classes. And it's just as good or better than the Tennessee Fire and Codes Academy. And it's a significant savings to us as well. It's free. All we have to do is throw some instructors at it
For 3 years, right?
Well, the training academy, but this
Okay.
Safer grant is free for 3 years.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am. And so, you know, last time we discussed back and forth on numbers, how many to ask for. Obviously, for simplistic reasons, it needs to be in multiples of 3 because we have 3 shifts. You can't just do 2. I mean, you could, but one shift's going to run short. So it need to be multiples of 3. So 3, 6, 9, and 12. And I guess that's kind of what we're here to discuss is what number, or maybe next meeting would be when to land on that number of what you would like to, how many you folks would like to hire.
I have a couple of questions for you. I
Sure.
don't know if anyone else does. So right now with the current staff that we have enough to staff all of the fire stations, including Fire Station 7. You may run overtime in that right now, but right now we currently have enough to adequately run. If we run that, like what we have now, would our service level still, it would be still high quality,
Sure, it should not affect your service
high
level.
level of service?
What you get into is potentially if there's illnesses, injuries, if folks leave us to go to another organization, you get into forcing overtime or not have enough staff, and that potentially could lead to not having enough staff to staff an engine company for a day or a truck company, whatever that would look like. That's the fear, is if we get so lean that if we have 2 people go out with injuries, we may get overtime. If you have an abundance of overtime, I think folks get tired of working overtime. We talk about in the service how stressful of a job it is. We want them to spend time with their family, get away. If they keep working 48s, have off a day and then turn around and come back to work again, it could be a very stressful situation for those staff members. So we want to try to stay away from that. We can certainly maintain operations. I can't predict what the future is going to look like as far as injuries or folks leaving. The 12 people, if we went after 12 as a number, it would only reduce our time off right now one slot. So that would really keep us in line with our operations right now.
Right now. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Before the bone meeting, Josie, I would like to have some information about what our current overtime looks like and how we might, like, I want to compare real numbers. So if we get 3 people or 6 people, how much less will we be paying in overtime? Are predicted to pay in overtime, because I am sensitive to that. We just signed the Project 303 flag because we're worried about and concerned and want to be supportive of mental health issues. And any job where you end up working a lot of overtime, you get burned out. It's not good. And I know that that people they love overtime because of the money, but to a point. And I don't want to be in a situation where we're forcing our firefighters into a situation where they get burned out, because I think that they will do whatever they have to do to make sure that we don't go without manning a truck or a station. And I don't want to ask them to do those things that are beyond what they ought to do. So I want to look at some real numbers about how much do we pay in overtime, what's the average, you know what I'm asking?
Yeah,
Like-
I actually have that
Oh,
information
you do?
pulled already. yeah,
Okay.
So we can share.
Just before the BOMA meeting, because I think that's when we'll have a really meaningful discussion about 369.
With the amount of employees we have now, though, we will never have it not staffed completely right now, right? Correct?
Unless a couple people get hurt.
Yeah, again, we with 122, if we're completely staffed, we could move folks to Station 7 and open it up
Okay.
100%. But again, unforeseen injuries, illnesses, things like that, you may lose some numbers somewhere along the way, and that may force an overtime. Really and truly, since 2018, when we got the last Safer grant, we really didn't bring them on board from the academy and stuff till 19. We really haven't been using a whole lot of overtime. We've really been managing that very well with the staffing. And so he'd have to go back, which he's done. We've had that conversation. He's dug back deeper, years past where we were at smaller staffing. If you look at the staff report in the center, he probably went back to 16, 15, where we were even smaller numbers. And that's probably where you see more of an impact for overtime. And I don't want to speak for you, but I think that's the conversation you and I had.
Yeah, on page 23, it gives a 10-year history of the staffing numbers. So, from 14 to 23, we've had the same amount of stations. Now we'll roll a new station on. So we could go back and look at, 14, 15, 16 and look at kind of what overtime was then. I think our budget for overtime this year was 40,000. And I think we were under that last year too. So that's
60.
okay.
Maybe a part of that is, I know, because we get your updates when there are situations that where people do get hurt on the job. Or like how maybe we could kind of project how much time we're gonna have people out because
We have those numbers.
there will be injuries.
We have the number, how much sick leave that we've used, how much vacation time has been used. I just did not get that and bring it tonight. That's my fault.
No, I just would like to have it before the BONA meeting so that
And so along with that is currently how we staff things, the UTV in the park, which is a service the board decided to do 2 or 3 years ago, is to provide that, the folks in the park system. When we open 7, that could dramatically affect that as well. We may not have the people on staff to put in that UTV. And we may have to say, hey, we need overtime for that. And the UTV can be anywhere from 7 in the morning till 9 at night, or it could just be a short window from 5 at night till 9 at night. So there's hours all over the place, but we've tried to manage it with on duty people who are already getting paid a salary. They're already at the work. So why not just put them in the UTV and have them in the parks, especially on the crowded event nights?
Does the UTV overtime, does that get paid out of fire or out of parks?
Fire.
I have a couple of concerns,
Sure.
but let me first start by saying the first responders, our fire department, police department, EMS, that is all extremely important to me. And I think that is something that is high priority for a city. But I do have some concerns with doing this grant with the recession coming. And my concerns, we don't know what's going to happen. We don't know how it's going to be affected with Fire Station 7. I feel like we owe it to our current employees to try and increase COLA and all of that for them before we bring on a possible debt with this. My suggestion would be to wait a year and address it in a year when we see the effects from Fire Station 7, see what kind of recession we go into. It's great to get the free firefighters, and I'm all for getting as many as we can, but I just don't know how the economy and everything is going to be. And if we can still perform at a high level, I'm just reluctant to vote for this until I see how that is for a year.
So the deal is this is just asking permission to submit. Obviously, if we submit, we may or may not get chosen. We don't have any say in that other than the grants that we write. And then it would have to come back to you folks for a vote, because then it would be, hey, we want 9, we want 12. We would submit for how many ever you wanted, but I hear what you're saying, and that's y'all's decision. 7's supposed to be open and online probably by the end of July, August. So you'd almost have to wait a full year to really understand the impact that it would have, which would put us past another opportunity to apply. So you'd almost have to wait 2 years. That's y'all's decision, whatever you decide to do, if that's what you want to do, because we really won't have enough solid numbers to give you based on August until the next budget cycle to see kind of how it's running, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I'm just concerned with the recession. If we've committed, and I know I did some research, the city has never had to lay anybody off after the 3 years, but we don't know the financial impact of what's going to hit us down the road. I know you can't always go by that, but I mean, it's pretty strong financial reporting that's gonna be coming down the road, so. I'm just not really comfortable doing that. I'd rather see what we could do to make the lives of all the employees a little better now and see how it affects before. That's just my personal opinion.
Do calls go, I know that like with COVID, calls go up for domestic violence and go down probably for other things. Do calls go down or during a recession, or is that?
No, our call
So
volume
the
stays
calls would stay,
constant, and actually in a recession, I would see that it would probably go up higher
the workload would.
because folks are losing their jobs. There's
So
more
they're at home
opportunities.
more, so they're more likely to start a fire in their house.
Well, I mean, you get into all that, businesses start doing arson. I mean, there's all that stuff that goes along with the recession because people start feeling the financial squeeze. So, I mean, that's hard to predict, to sit here and say for sure it would or would not. But I would say if you did some kind of research on it, you would see that a recession, you'd probably see that crime and
Yeah.
EMS calls and everything else probably went up.
Yeah. I didn't know,
Sure.
but if you apply for 6 and then you have to accept 6, if they approve it, you can't say, well, we're just gonna take 3.
So you can,
Okay,
but so if we put in for 12 and you said you only wanted to pay for 6, we would have to do an addendum to FEMA. And then obviously that would potentially, if you wanted to apply another year or 2
it
years,
could be.
well, they may look at it negatively and say, well, you submitted for 12 when you only wanted 6. And they may revoke it when you do the addendum. They say, well, we're going to pull it back. We're not going to give it to you. And that's just how the federal government works.
But if we said our community in particular was hard hit by a recession because sales tax revenue is pretty fundamental to us right now. That seems like a legitimate reason to say, well, we need to back off of what we've asked for. If we.
I mean, we certainly, again, that's y'all's decision. We don't mind submitting that and saying, hey, we see a reason to drop from 12 to 6 or 12 to 3 or 9 to 3, whatever y'all decide. But you're just putting the ball back in their court for them to say, you know what?
They
We're
might say no.
correct. They may pull it all away from you and give it to somebody else.
Yeah.
That's just the gamble you take.
So it's definitely better to get it right first time.
If I could say something too. I think over time. We talked about how do we really analyze this objectively, right? And our whole goal is here just to give you guys information. You guys can determine level of service, but we're here to give you as much information to make that determination. And right now, the fire department's going through an accreditation process. And part of that process is determining fire suppression's average daily staffing. So we run the guys a day on, 2 days off. So the fire schedule is like a 3-day schedule where you have, your shift A, day 1, shift B, day 2, shift 3, day C, and it just repeats. Each one of those shifts, what we're really talking about here for minimum numbers is the fire suppression staff. So at a minimum, the recommendation is that the minimum recommendation is that you have 3 people on each piece of equipment. So we have 6 stations, and 2 of those stations have dual companies where they run an engine and a ladder truck. So we have a total of 8 pieces of equipment that run. So to meet the minimum staffing numbers, we have to have 24 because it's 3 times 8 for the A shift, the B shift, and the C shift, right? Well, if you staffed at a 24 level, you would never hit your 24 because vacation times, Kelly days, sick days, injury days. So you would have to staff at 29, 30, 31. And that would be your minimum staffing level so that you account for vacation, sick, days off, so that you would actually have 24 who actually show up on a routine basis. There's going to be days where you have overtime, probably no matter what you do. But a very important number that Chief Bush and his department came up with was their average daily staffing right now as it sits. And that's 29.4. And so on an average day, they have 29. That's because some days will have 29, some days will have 30. And that will fluctuate. But that 29.4 means we're able to meet our minimum of 24 and we have some room, 5.4 of additional over a minimum. So if you add Fire Station 7 on, that's another piece of equipment. So you're gonna have another engine. So instead of 8, you'll have 9. So at a minimum staffing level, you'd have to have 27, right? You have to have 9 times 3, you'd have to have 27. So at 29.4, that gives you 2.4 on an average daily. So you'd have 2.4 over a minimum requirement. That that's going to fluctuate from day to day. So I would think it will, while you can cover it, the level of service can cover it. I think that when it comes to overtime, we will have to say there will be an additional overtime cost. That may be small, it may be large, but the average daily staffing number is probably the most objective way to view staff who are actually coming, because I mean, you can have vacation and sick time, but you don't really always know how it's going to be used day to day. So that's the actual guy. Those are the boots on the ground who show up on a shift every day. So I think that's a pretty objective number to use. We were going to back into it by saying, hey, what are the total hours worked with all the guys and back out vacation and sick, but the
And how many
29.4.
days would we, in the past year, did we go below that 27? That would be interesting to me.
We can't. So, and the number right now is 24.
Right, but it will be 27 in July.
Correct.
So that would be more meaningful. I
Yeah,
think.
but we'd also have to at that point. So if there were those days that fall below 27 right now, it doesn't matter, right? Because it's 24.
Right, but in the.
We would
future.
have to call for overtime. So it wouldn't necessarily trigger us right now if the staffing fell below 27 because we need 24.
Mhm.
Adding a fire
That's-
station 7 on, then we'd say, okay, well, now a trigger is
Cause
27.
that would, it's not something that you can predict, but there would be an overtime cost that we wouldn't have now that would offset some of this cost. Except for that overtime cost would occur in year 1, not where we wouldn't have any costs with this until year 4. Did that make sense? You're
There-
looking at me
there-
like I didn't.
No,
express
there will I don't see a way that we do it without at least some additional overtime costs, I would think.
it. Mhm.
And we can see, I guess what we could see is the days that fell below 27. If we calculated those days up, and then we said, hey, for every day that fell below 27, we'd have an overtime component on that day. And
Right,
so. Do you have
If
average daily staff?
7 had
Mhm.
been.
So we could
Just
probably
take
go
some time
back
to get
and
together.
say
if
we
the
could
new
go,
Station had been open. then
we can calculate how many days would
the
require.
staffing
overtime.
remained constant.
And now
Yeah.
some of that will change a little bit based on when vacations are allowed to,
Sure.
because some of that flexibility, it might not be as
gone.
flexible as it is now,
Mhm.
right? We'd say, hey, we have to be more careful when we take vacations because we have a rather large buffer now, or we have a buffer.
Yeah.
We won't have that same buffer.
Mhm.
So it would be,
Not
know-
everybody can go to spring break on spring break
Right,
anymore,
right.
so, right, and that's,
so we could give you what that number is, but it would tighten up if we added another station on. So it might be a little bit higher than what we'd actually see, because we'd probably say do a better job of spreading your vacation time out.
So
Yeah.
1710, NFPA 1710 is a guideline. Their minimum staffing is 4. Their recommendation is 4 people, whether it's engine or truck. So you take like a truck company, they pull up and they have to work. If it's a working incident, you've got an officer in charge. Right now, with minimum of 3, you've got an officer in charge, you've got a driver operator, and then a firefighter in the back. If we raise that aerial device, you lose that engineer or that driver because they're dedicated to the turntable. So now your truck company is down to 2 people. Okay, now
it's
they,
not really safe for them.
well, right, they can work in teams of 2. That's the only allowable limit is 2. They cannot do solo work. We don't work alone on fire grounds.
You never know.
So same thing for an engine company. When they pull up, if they have a working incident, you've got an engineer, you've got an officer, and then you've got a firefighter. That pumper operator's job is to get them to the scene safe, get water supply, provide water to them as they attack fire. OSHA standards, 2 in, 2 out. If there's a life safety issue, you can break that rule all day long. So if you're trapped or or you think somebody's trapped in that house, we can break that rule all day long, every day,
Mhm.
to risk a lot to gain a lot.
Mhm. Mhm.
But if we pull up on a house fire and we don't have enough staffing, and there's no threat to human life, we're not allowed to go in. And that's a mandated federal law, 2 in and 2 out.
It's a lot to think about.
Sure, it's not cheap, 100%, I agree.
But I would like to move it to BOMA with a favorable recommendation.
There is a time frame. So obviously, without waiving the 2-week rule, it would have to be discussed at the next one. I think like later that week, I think the next meeting is March, right? Should be March something.
March is the same as, yeah, March 14th.
March 14th. I think we have to have it submitted by the 17th. So if we hold the meeting the 14th and y'all decide on whatever number that is, we've already been working on the grant. We have not submitted it, waiting for whatever number comes back, or if we're going to do it at all. So that's not a big deal. The morning of the 15th, after the meeting, we would submit based on whatever comes out of the meeting on the 14th. Just know that there's a deadline. We could not push it back. We would just miss the window of opportunities to submit.
I would like to submit it to BOMA without a recommendation.
I'll second.
I vote no. Well, no. I vote yes, because I want it to go to
Have the whole
BOMA.
board discuss.
Yeah.
Excellent.
So all in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Okay. We, other agenda items, we have recognition of a citizen who made a $5,000 donation to Learn Not to Burn. Is that you?
Yes, ma'am. So the gentleman has not really want his name out there. We worked an incident on Harbor Drive back before winter hit. And his wife perished in that house fire. And he was pretty demanding about us taking that $5,000 check from him. Just thanking us for the job we did. How thankful he is for the service that public safety provides here in Hendersonville. Obviously, that's the only way that we can take money like that. We tried to give it back. We don't want it. He was pretty insistent on it. We have written him a letter, thanking him, letterhead. And I think finance has done the same thing. But that Learn Not to Burn program is basically where we buy our helmets, coloring books, things that we give back to the community. So it's not like it's just sitting in an account that we don't use that money for something to give back to folks in the community. So like the shaker fire alarms for people that are deaf. The state fire marshal's office don't provide those, but we buy those to provide the bed shaker detectors for people that can't hear. So that's how we use some of that money. Obviously, when we get on down lower with this 501c3, we're talking about creating, that would be the avenue to move that money to at some point.
Great. And next, we need to appoint a vice chair to public safety. I'd like to nominate Jana.
Second. Oh, you don't second nomination, sorry.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Approved. Okay. And then next is creating a 501(c)(3) for the fire department. Is Mike Martin here?
I think he's in the other meeting, if I'm not mistaken.
He was gonna talk about it. I could talk about it a little bit, but
Sure.
we'll let him. I think it's a fantastic idea and I would love to see the fire department get it. The city will have no involvement in it other than they will probably work with the fire department. It will probably be similar to the Hendersonville Citizens Police Academy.
He's coming.
Okay. You want to talk about the 501(c)(3)? Did I put you on the spot?
No, so. Yeah, so the 501c3 is something that Chief Bush has been thinking about for a while. There was an attorney that volunteered to help out. And we've been kind of talking through some candidates to take the position. I'm hoping that one of those candidates would be one of the BOMA members here. If that was, that would be, I think, good because it would provide continuity between, BOMA and that 501c3.
It will be completely separate from the city, though.
Yeah, it'll be completely separate. But since it impacts public safety, I thought it'd be nice to have the continuity, not required. Just an idea.
And what would be the purpose of this for people that may be watching or all?
Yeah, so this would be a great opportunity for fundraising for the fire department. Whenever we talk about issues, and if you look at the YouTube videos, finance has been a strong issue to the fire department. My understanding is that the police have a nonprofit group called Citizens Police Academy, and they're able to have golf tournaments and raise funds and really advocate for the police department. So this would be something similar where they could also have golf tournaments, fundraising, things like that, and bring people on to really promote it. And from what I understand, there's opportunities to have, family days out where they can come and the fire department can teach them, hey, make sure you have this in your house, your smoke detectors, and kind of train them too, very similar to the police academy.
Great. Well, I'm in full support of that. I know we don't have to vote on that. Another thing I would like it to see is to help the firefighters fund things that the city doesn't fund. The organization like the police department, the Citizens Police Academy Alumni Association helps fund through fundraising, get the officers things that aren't provided by the city. And I would love for the fire department, for the firefighters and all over there to have the same thing. So I think it's great.
Great. We got to protect those that protect us.
Yes.
I think it's an opportunity for us to really sell what we do too, kind of like what they do in the Citizens Police Academy. We could host an in-house academy for folks that want to sign up to be in it. And we basically hold it one night a month for, 6 to 8 weeks, 10 weeks if needed. And we just demonstrate what we do, who we are. And, if folks want to look at an aerial device, we'll bring an aerial device out. If they want to get up in a bucket, as long as these two gentlemen sign off on that, they're okay with that, then we'll take them up, make it as safe as possible. We'll do all the things that we do with in-house recruits, minus the heat and the smoke. We have an opportunity in Gouldsville that they have a controlled burn area. And we certainly could put people in the academy in that environment so they could kind of see the circumstances that we deal with when we have those incidents. Extrications, kind of see how the tools work. Folks know what we do, but they truly don't know what we do if we don't open it up and let them come in and see who we are. And I think it's huge for us to do that.
I think it's great. So I'm all for that. Anybody else on that? That's great. Another thing that was brought to BOMA was possibly creating a policy for LPR cameras. If we want to even create a policy. I have some thoughts on that I've written some notes, but I would like to hear from.
So I meet with HOA presidents. I haven't done it this year yet. I've done it for the past 2 years and just help them learn from each other, but also hear some of their concerns. And I tell them quite frankly that HOAs have a greater impact on property values than the city probably does. And I want them to enforce their covenants and restrictions, and I want them to expect people to take care of the house and the property. One of the questions that came up in that was about the LPR cameras and about safety. And our officers have been very good about going out and meeting with the HOAs. In both of those meetings that I've had, we had Officer Jamie Owens there to talk with them about some items. And we talked about LPR cameras, and the question came up about LPR cameras inside the subdivisions. And it sort of hit me that we don't have any other organization or any other type of organizations that would ever ask that question, is how can we help reduce crime and catch criminals in Hendersonville? How can we help the police department? And we don't have any other organizations that really could have the kind of impact that HOAs have. And so one of the things I mentioned to them is it might be worthwhile that if they wanted LPR cameras in their subdivisions, which is not which is not unheard of, and there are many subdivisions that have done that throughout the country, just done that on their own. That we would look at helping them with that. However, they would have to make sure that the data ties in with their data. If they just have cameras that are shooting at license plate, that doesn't help anybody. It has to tie into the data so that the data can notify police, this is a car that has been stolen, or this is a car that's owned by somebody else. So Mansfield Farms, which has had some problems with criminals coming into subdivisions, obviously. They were the first ones that went out and did this, and without letting us know, they went out and bought 2 cameras. I say without letting us know. I know they talked to some folks in police because they made sure that it tied together, because Stork, is that right? No, it's not Stork. Flock.
Wow.
Because Flock had made some changes. They made sure, I always say Stork. So they made sure that it tied in with our cameras, and they went out and paid for those. And then they came to me and said, okay, what are you gonna do for us? It's like, that's a really good question. So you all heard my conversation back in the workshop. That what I want to do was buy the next 2 that would be in their subdivision. They have them going in or going out, and I suggested maybe we buy the other ones. What I had told the HOAs before was I think that we should share that cost. Specifically, what Mansfield Farm asked was either pay for half of them or buy us 2 more, and 2 more is what seems to make the most sense. I can't do that myself. That's something that I will include in the budget, in my proposed budget next year. But I think it makes sense for us to have a policy of what do we do, how do we implement that, and what do we do in those situations?
Okay. I'm gonna disagree with you,
Okay,
and here are my reasons.
okay,
I'm for putting LPRs all over the city if we can.
okay.
I think they are a fabulous tool for the police department. I think it helps us with our crime. I don't know why the criminals keep coming up here knowing that we're gonna catch them with. My concern with if the city is to purchase part of that, where does it stop? And I feel like we're almost being kind of discriminatory, because if you're not in an HOA, what if I want one at the end of my driveway and the city's gonna pay half and I pay the other half and I'm on a street? I feel like you can't pick and choose. I feel like we're setting a bad precedent if we start putting them in HOAs. If they want to put them up and pay for it, great, hook them into the police department and allow them to use it. But I just feel like you're opening a can of worms if you start paying for half, because what if this subdivision can't afford to do that, but they want it? And here the city has paid. I would love for every subdivision to put them in there, and that'd be great, but I don't know that the city needs to pay for those. And I feel like the police department needs to pick and choose where they go, but if individuals want to put them up, that's great.
Okay.
That will assist them. That's just my personal feeling.
So if we had a policy, should we maybe have the police department specify what subdivisions, or the police department maybe sign off on whether that subdivision, we work with that subdivision out? Because quite frankly, we have some subdivisions that are, 20, 40 houses, may not make sense there. And so I'd be fine with the police department saying, this doesn't really help us. I'd be fine with that. And I'd also be fine if somebody who lives on Walton Ferry Road wanted to buy one. And
I mean,
that's it.
I'm fine for putting them,
Whole thing,
but
because it is sort of like, without even having a list from the police department of where the priorities would be, we're sucking our half of the cost, we're sucking that money to prioritize neighborhoods that have HOAs over, like, Walton Ferry Road would, I don't know that is would be in your top 10. Obviously, the bypass that we talked about would be, but it pulls not, because I think a lot of neighborhoods are going to take advantage of it. In fact, I've already had a question from one of my neighbors. How's that going to work for us when our entrance and exit are in Gallatin?
I'd still be fine doing it with them. If their houses are in Hendersonville, that's great.
Yeah, the houses are, but do you see what I mean about how it prioritizes HOA neighborhoods over? Because I can imagine the first year we could have easily 15 or 20.
Okay.
So that would suck all of that money away from buying cameras where the police department has prioritized them to be. I think if they pay for all of it, let's loop them in.
I mean, I'm for any subdivision that wants to put them up, put them all over the city if you want. But I feel like they need to pay for it. I feel like we just open a can of worms if the city can pay for their own to put in the locations that the police department deems they need to be.
Maybe I shouldn't say that we should restrict to HOAs. I think any neighborhood with or without an HOA, any resident, any business that wants to put those up, and maybe we restrict it to 10 a year and just, something like that. I'd be absolutely fine with that, because we don't want to take money away from ones that we're buying that have a greater use, because quite honestly, we've got some busier roads in Hendersonville. We'll probably need them more than in some subdivisions. So maybe we restrict it to amount of money, and obviously we would do that with the budget by only appropriating so much money for what I guess we call maybe residential. I don't know. But I like the idea of not restricting it just to HOAs and putting a cap on how many we would do each year. That'd be fine.
I just don't know if the city ought to pay to put them anywhere other than where the
Where
police department.
prioritizes.
I'd say both.
But yeah, if we had all kinds of money, I would say both too.
I'd say both, but we don't, how much, 15,000?
For,
For the residential, 15,000 for the bypass.
Okay.
that's for the high speed camera, so the $2,500 a year per camera
Okay.
is the current cost on those.
Okay.
So, and most locations take more than one camera, so that's where you run into it's, 5,000.
Mhm.
It still favors HOAs because they are really much more capable of providing for an annual expense than a collection of neighbors who aren't organized under an HOA.
I'm fine doing that as opposed to not providing any help. I still want to fund them for new LPR cameras where they feel like they need to go. But as a separate line item, I don't want to fund any organization or business or HOA or resident that is willing to contribute to this.
I would like to just advertise that it's available to be looped into the LPR. I don't think people know that they can buy a camera and loop it into the LPR system. But I think,
I don't know that that's something that ought to be advertised, but
well,
I'm not in,
I would want
That's a good point.
your advice on that too.
I mean, I feel like you can
With
also
that.
have an overreach if we have a camera, I mean, that's great for crime, but are you gonna get the other side of the coin where people are gonna be upset that you have 100 LPR cameras in Henderson?
How
I don't
many do
know.
we currently have?
16.
We've got how many?
16.
16.
How many would you like to have if you were provided a magic wand?
Well, we definitely want them on the bypass, and that's our number one concern right now. Around Mott Haven is, not Mott Haven, Massacre Farms that which one you just brought up?
Yeah, Massacre Farms.
Spencer
Yeah.
Farms.
That,
Mhm.
Walton Ferry is another place that, then we get a lot of traffic from bad guys coming in.
Mhm.
From Massacre Farms, they, come in from Goodlettsville. And so they miss our cameras.
Oh. I see what you're saying. Mhm.
And we don't have to decide this now. I appreciate any input.
So it's something we can revisit and think about,
Mhm.
or send it to BOMA to have a full discussion, or
Probably do is I'll write
Yeah,
up something, so
resolution.
I'll write up something so that it goes with the budget ordinance. And so, like I said, I'll be asking for some from Massacre Farms, and I'll write up something, and then we can change that and tweak it as we go.
Well, I
Just
think
for
since
example.
Manscar Farms has been identified as a priority, that is kind of a separate thing than
I still feel like if you do it there, you're opening a can of worms. That's just my personal opinion, and I'm not opposed to the cameras at all, so I don't want you to take it that I'm opposed to it. I just think that's a bad precedent to set.
I would. I'm keeping an open mind about it right now, but I would like to fully fund the LPR cameras that are the priority for the police department. before we start putting them. I just can't imagine there would be very many neighborhoods who have HOAs that are not going to want a camera.
So probably haven't, I mentioned about a year ago. I wish all of them would too, but they've sort of been slow to respond. And I think for some, especially smaller ones, they look at this as an expense and they think, we don't have that kind of money to spend on this.
Cause it's a yearly expense. It's not a one time
2,500.
per camera,
Yeah, I mean,
It's 2,500 per camera.
per camera.
I think Ward 5 might be a little bit different because we have a lot of HOAs that have swimming pools and walking trails, and they are several that already have gated sections, if not the whole neighborhood. So they are like a $2,500 annual fee is not a huge budget item for a lot of the neighborhoods in Ward 5, I would think, that are HOAs, but not everything in Ward 5 is an HOA. So my opinion is probably skewed from citywide. There probably are a lot of HOAs that would not be interested, but since this conversation has come up, I have heard from several people who are asking more specific questions
I think it's a
about
good.
how their cameras would be.
Mhm.
So I would want to know, like, all the cameras that you would really prioritize and what that looks like for us.
Yeah, we can get that. to
You did, yeah, I know. You just made the
You know,
list.
we need something more on the east end. Because
Mhm.
we're seeing traffic coming in from north of us. And we need them on the bypass. And those are critical, I think, at this point, but you know, the more cameras we have out here, I wish they were in every neighborhood, because not only do they help us spot a stolen car coming in, but they also help us when we're doing the investigation, when we're seeing who's going in and out.
And we've tried to temper a request to Boma not to go. I mean, we could have justified a request the first year to buy cameras for the entire, you know, to all over the city, but
Sure.
obviously
The
that's very
easiness
expensive.
to it is.
Right. And
Yeah.
just adding a few each year, and so.
And they've asked for more than what I put in my budgets.
They're very worthwhile to them.
I agree with that.
We can keep working on it.
Okay, I think we have one citizen that wants to speak for a minute. We can let your dog speak. I guess, yes.
Wow.
So we're running off.
No.
Jesse, do you have a timer?
Yep. What do you want to say? 5 minutes?
We'll wait till he starts.
60.
I have a question about after this, about gate.
You want to sit down?
I'll try to answer.
Yeah.
We'll do the 5 minutes like they do at Boma for you.
Right.
Do I need to say my name?
Your name and address.
Name and address. All right. Bill Carpen, 106 Maureen Drive, Hendersonville.
You can go ahead and talk.
Go
You're
ahead
good.
and talk. All right, well, this is gonna be a little tough because you guys just been running through the ringer here. With a bunch of other stuff, much more important than my stuff. But it does need to get addressed, and I think it would be a disservice if I tried to get this thing out in 5 minutes or 2 minutes or whatever I got here. I'd like to, I mean, I can give an introduction here to what the scope of this thing is. And maybe go into it more detail, because I know there's a lot of clutter out there. Misinformation that's been given so far drastically. And I wanted just to clear the air with what actually has gone on. And it all started about a year ago this time that I met with Chief Miller here, bringing it to his attention that I'm running into all these traffic problems 2 times a day, every day for 9 months. And that it wasn't probably going as well as it was being reported back to him, because the problems were that there was so much traffic going on there that they were parked on residences, front edge property. There was intersections that were blocked, that were actually blocking the buses that were already late and trying to go. It was just a plethora of problems. And I think the one that really spurred me to say enough is enough, because I really don't go there by there that much at that time of day. So it wasn't an inconvenience thing like some people desperately want to believe, that I was just inconvenienced. It's not the case at all. What really triggered it was when I saw an ambulance running hot, heading south on Walton Ferry Road, right around Hawkins. Couldn't get through. Made sense because you have a fire department on Luna, which is just past Hawkins, that they would have to go one way or the other, either coming or going. So from all areas, it just didn't make sense. And then I tried to learn, well, what was causing all this? And the problem that was caused was a combination of the complete dissemination of the school bus transportation system, meaning the bus system probably, I'm not privy to any facts because there's no transparency in trying to work with Dr. Phillips, who I met with several times to try to solve this problem. And I thought he was going to be very cooperative and interested in learning until, I found out he wasn't. One of the first things was I got lied to right out of the gate, that all these parents changed over to not take the bus because they wanted quality time with their kids. Now, I don't doubt there's a certain percentage of families that believe that or think that. I come from an area that was ridiculous. And when it was 90-something% that parents wanted to use the bus because they didn't want to be tied up all day, every day, 2 times a day. And it was probably a lot longer. It wasn't just a drive and drop off. They had to wait quite a bit. So there's a lot of time consumption there. But so I started digging a little deeper and found out what the real problems were, that they lost a lot of bus drivers because basically they were abused. They weren't listened to. There was a lot of problems going on back when there wasn't GPSs and there wasn't cameras and stuff. I can sympathize with that there's fights on there or whatever, and nobody was listening to the bus drivers, so they got frustrated. And then, you want me to stop?
No, I was just
Okay.
saying there's 1 minute left.
And then on top of it, they weren't getting paid. And that got resolved after I met with Phillips. I guess the next budget came up, and it was an amazing coincidence that bus drivers got almost double pay, probably a lot of back pay or something. So that helped, but that's not the answer. And I wanted to continue to do this and build a program to rebuild everything, to get the confidence back. I even have a sheet here that said, why do parents, what's the deciding factor why parents have their kids take the bus or not? There was 11 reasons, and I have it here. I can share it with you if you want. Not one of them said anything about quality time or anything. It was all the number 1 and 2 things was dependability. Could they bank on a bus picking them up and dropping them off at the right times? Which makes sense. So I'm going to stop. Up to you guys. But I'd like to continue this because I really do think this does need to get played out and get this responsibility off of Hendersonville and the police about putting a Band-Aid fix on having patrol girls, take care of that traffic problem. And by the way, when I saw that ambulance that time, I passed after all that cleared, I passed one of the girls. I remember what she looks like, but I don't know her name. And I said, "This ain't working, is it?" She goes, "No." And then even today, they're actually reducing the amount of patrol girls, say at Walton Ferry Elementary.
They're officers.
They're officers.
They're not. Okay.
And there were 2 there because there's 2 entrance ways, and I guess there were some other additional complaints besides me that said, hey, they're pulling halfway in to the entrance of Walton Ferry Elementary, and they're stopping on the sidewalk.
which, or driveways, which was happening. And there were some complaints, so there was 2 girls to be able to handle each end because they're pretty far apart. And now there's only 1. And I keep in touch with that particular patrol girl to see how things are going but I'm left out of it. There's a gag order on, say, the principals and whatnot to help me, what percentage of parents are now getting back on board. Do we need to do some promotional stuff? Because it's easy to do that. It's real easy to do that. And you win the confidence back, and then you've got a lot of new people coming in, so they're not going to be carrying any luggage or, they're not going to carry past memories of this stuff and probably get on board. But across the nation, there's statistics on this that 90% or more really want to take the bus. And then you can get into the green stuff like, well, it's better carbon print too, because you don't have all those cars sitting there putting along. But that's just the long and short of it. Up so far, what's been addressed here, I'm just going to be honest with you. 2/3, if not more, 3/4 were lies about me. It was all about me, and I wanted, parents not to drive, or it was all sounded like I was demanding things, and that wasn't the case at all. And I think Miller can attest for that. I didn't come in and whine and cry. Did I not come? I came in and I had charts of overhead aerial maps of saying here with Hawkins. Did you know that if you just put a little gravel road there, you can access a whole nother street that somebody could be taking besides Walton Ferry? Just trying to come up with some ideas. Sometimes you just got to kick the can a little bit, and then all of a sudden, something gets done. But right now, I don't think anything is getting done, and I'd like to change that. So that's it in a nutshell.
Thank you.
Okay. Is there any follow-up to this? Right? Is there any follow-up to this where we can put something?
Well, a
like
lot of that
continue
has
work?
to do with school board, not with what BOMA can do.
Okay, well, I might be able to disagree with that. Because I don't know the relationship. Here again, I don't want to get into this more than I have to. But I don't know what the relationship is and how the school board tells city to do that, and what the relationship is and all that stuff. But it seems like a lot of liability to be taken on for nothing. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Anybody want to make a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn. So second.
So moved. Meeting is adjourned.
I can answer your question fairly quickly.
All right.
That's possible. It would be very good. I will see if there's any, I don't know there's any more way to track that. If it occurred,
I didn't know if there were specific that even though called.
so the way our CAT RMS works is
What is it?
if we do by
Okay,
address,
what is-
it's gonna show you the complaints at that address.
It took a lot of money.
So that's, that's what we ran.